Well, there's not a lot of disagreement that this stadium has reached the end of its useful life.
It's time to talk Stadium of the Future. Coming up in the Sunday Sports Zone, we're breaking down the future of TIAA Bank Field and what the Jaguars' new home could look like. That's coming up in the Sunday Sports Zone that starts right now. Welcome into the Sunday Sports Zone. We've got a busy show and a lot of ground to cover tonight as we start to talk the Stadium of the Future. You can just call me Bob the Builder because I'm going to put my construction hat on as we start to look forward to what the Jaguars' new home could look like. The Jaguars unveiled their plans for what their new stadium hopes to look like one day. I got the chance to sit down with Jaguars team president Mark Lamping earlier this week, who said that it's time. Now is the time. Jacksonville is growing and TIAA Bank Field is just at the end of its life cycle.
We need to have a place to play that meets the standards that our fans expect and, that the team requires. And this stadium isn't it. That's why we started talking about this back in 2016. I think now's our time. I mean, the city's exploding. The Jaguars are ascending. It's time. And, we're going to do everything we can to help seize the opportunity.
And what's the timeline for this project?
Well, our schedule would have serious construction begin after the conclusion of the 2025 NFL season. So hopefully February of 2026. And then at that point, it depends on how you approach the construction. If you do it in the least disruptive, quickest, and cheapest manner, you start the renovations and then you finish the renovations. And those renovations would be completed in time for the 2028 season. The other alternative is to do the renovations over a 4-year period, okay? That will allow you to be renovating during the off-season, you'd stop, and then you'd have the games. And those games in those 4 years would be played basically in a stadium that's under construction.
Can we talk about some of the pros and cons, I guess, of both directions? Obviously, the 4-year plan, more expensive, but you already have an aging stadium, and fans now, you have to start to concern yourself with the fan experience, right? Of you have an aging stadium, and now you've got a construction project going on at the same time.
From our perspective, we understand both. We've come up with a plan to do it both ways. We want the plan that's the least disruptive to our fans and to the team, that's the most efficient, and that's the least expensive. The one thing about this subject that I'm excited about is if we get into where the team's going to be playing during the renovation, that means we got a deal on the stadium, okay? And if we can get that done, I know we'll be able to solve where the team plays during the interim.
You heard him. Look, it's time to talk about the Stadium of the Future. Now, the complicated part is figuring out when the city and the Jaguars can come to an agreement, but many of us believe they will. If after they come to that agreement where things even get a little bit messier, there's two different options, a 2-year plan and a 4-year plan. The 4-year plan keeps the team at TIAA Bank Field playing games through the construction. It'll be a little inconvenient for the fans that go to the games, but the team would stay in Jacksonville. On the other hand, the 2-year plan takes the team out of the construction zone and playing games somewhere else, most likely outside of the city of Jacksonville, because there are stadiums that can be considered inside the city, but all of them would take a lot of money to make a major renovation to that stadium to make them capable of housing the Jaguars. So if the team did play 2 seasons outside of Jacksonville, where exactly would they play? Well, there's been a few stadiums that have already been discussed. One of them, Camping World Stadium in Orlando. Not exactly ideal, but it's not a bad stadium. One that could definitely house an NFL game and could easily house the Jaguars for 2 years. Another one that, of course, our Gators fans will like this option, the Swamp in Gainesville, has been heavily discussed as an option for the Jaguars to be their home away from home of sorts. But there's also a new contender. Reports are surfacing that the Jaguars are now planning to meet with the folks at Daytona International Speedway. This is, to me, the most interesting option of the 3. Not exactly a football stadium. They've never actually hosted a football game, but that's also what kind of makes it cool. People love the NASCAR spot, and they love what it can do for races. They're used to housing big groups, so it would be cool to have some our Jaguars games there. out on the racetrack. We'll see what it looks like. We'll see what the Jaguars decide. This is a very complicated topic with a lot of ground to cover, so let's bring in a little bit of help. We'll bring in 1010XL's Frank Frangie, and of course, News4Jax's newest member to the sports team, Alessandra. Frank, let's start with you. You know I'm not a fan of the 2-year plan. You know I'm not, but there's 2 options, and the 4-year plan looks less and less likely.
I can't imagine that they wouldn't do the 2-year plan. And Jamal, you and I have had this conversation. Yeah, it's inconvenient. You got to drive to Orlando or Gainesville or wherever, and I understand that. But sometimes to get great things, you have to have that. The reality is the 4-year plan is going to cost $190 million more dollars, and you're waiting longer for your stadium. So I can't imagine, and I've told you this before, I can't imagine that the 2-year plan isn't the best plan. I just can't fathom that. I think that's where they'll land. And I think it's Gainesville, not because of that helmet behind me, by the way. I think it's easier. Remember, they put on a game every week in football season. They know how to do it. Security and ticket takers and the 300 people that work those games, concessions. Jamal, they do it every week. You don't have to add anything to it. You don't have to train anybody. You don't have to bring in any extra first responders. They know how to do it. It's a grass field. It's close by. I can't imagine that's not where it'll land. Maybe it lands in Orlando, but you don't have to do any work. I agree with you. Daytona's cool. But all the work it would take to make that football ready, it's only 2 years, man, and you got one that's football ready. That's what I think they're going to do.
All right, Frank, clearly not a fan of Daytona. Alessandra, back me up here. You got to be on my side with this. Daytona is just way too cool of an option for me to be the only one that sees that, right?
Well, you are my boss, so I don't really want to go
I wouldn't
against
call
you.
me that.
But I agree. I think the 2-year plan is definitely the way to go. Why would you pay almost $200 million more and wait double the amount of time? 2 years is really not that long of time. Going to Gainesville, I've never driven over there, but it's not that long. I agree, though. I kind of like the Daytona International Speedway. Obviously, they can put on huge events like an NFL football game. But like Frank Frangie did say, Gainesville, they already play football. They have everyone staffed for, what's one extra game on a Sunday, which that does take a lot more to do. Obviously, I've seen how football stadiums get ready for games before, but I'm okay with both sides, but 4 years is definitely not something I would look into. I think, like you guys, 2 years is going to be what they decide on.
Yeah, 2 years definitely the plan that the Jaguars are going to roll. At least that's the plan that they want to roll with. I think Daytona's cool. I've also was at the college football game that was at the track in Bristol when Tennessee played Virginia Tech. So I've seen a NASCAR track make that switch, and I think it's cool, even though Daytona a much bigger track and a lot more work that would have to be done. All right, let's talk about the concepts. Frank, I haven't got the chance to chat with you since those concepts rolled out. Kind of looks like a spaceship. There's a lot of cool features. What's your favorite one?
I love the fact that it's covered yet not enclosed. I think, and we had that talk too. If you've been to SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, I've had a few games there, Jamal. It's amazing. It's covered. There's no rain. The one thing Mark Lamping, when they put out the survey, he knew people wanted out of the sun. He didn't think there'd be so many people that would love to be out of the rain too. So you're out of the rain, yet it's not enclosed. That concept that SoFi came up with it in Los Angeles. Now, this one's not $5 billion like that one. That's the coolest thing. Yeah, it looks cool. It looks like a spaceship. But the fact that it's not enclosed, the wind can blow through there. It can feel like you're outside, yet you're covered from both sun and rain. I think that's the coolest thing. I think it's going to be the coolest stadium in the NFL when it gets done. Now, maybe the next one 5 years later is cooler, but I love the way this thing's coming about. And I hope it's look, things change a lot. There's going to be some give and take with the administration. We all know that. But I hope they keep the rudiments of this concept, because I really like it, Jamal.
I'll tell you one thing. When those concepts rolled out, there was a tizzy, and people were worried because they couldn't see the pools. Alessandra heard them here all through our building. They were like, are the pools going to be there? And you know what? I talked to the designer. The pools are still in there. So cool feature there. Everyone can kind of take a deep breath and say that, hey, don't worry, the swimming pools will stay at the stadium. The parkscapes around in the raised entry, kind of one thing that piqued my interest. Alessandra, what do you think? I mean, it does still kind of look like a spaceship, but I do like it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what I really love about it is that, like Frank talked about, the canopy that's going to make it 10 to 15 degrees cooler. I'm loving anything to make it cooler because I'm not very good with the heat. But I do like the concept with the parks and the running trails. I'm a big runner, so that's going to be very nice if that, can come to fruition. But I think the design with when you walk into the subtropical concourse, I think that's going to be really, really cool. Very futuristic in my opinion. And I love the outdoors and plants and all that stuff. So I think that'll be beautiful to see, but also for people who don't really love football, they get to explore the stadium. That itself is an entire event, from what it looks like at least.
This is quite the project for downtown Jacksonville, and definitely would be a reshaping of the downtown in the River City that we currently know, if they can make it match the concept that has been released. Let's circle back to those 2- and 4-year plans, though, and spend a little bit more time there. Frank, I know that we kind of touched on it to start with, but that's the big topic that people are looking at. What would it mean for this team to not just get a stadium, but have to play outside in this time period of the franchise for 2 years?
Well, that's a good question. And Jamal, look, I get it. The people say we have been loyal to this team. We go to that stadium every week, even when the team's struggling. Now we have a good team. And by all accounts, it's going to be a good team the next 3, 4, 5, however many years. Do we really want 2 of those years with a really good team in Trevor Lawrence's prime to not have the games here? I get that, and I totally get it, and I think it's a fair point. And I think Mark Lamping gets it too, Jamal. I think people understand that. So, yeah, that would be hard, but I can't emphasize this enough. It's only an hour and a half. We're not going very far. And I don't want, me personally, just me, I don't want it to be in Orlando, because then you'll hear all the stuff about the Orlando Jags, and that's where the team should be, and why aren't they here all the time? We already have the NBA. I don't like that. The team's not going anywhere, by the way. None of this will happen until there's a long lease extension. But you'll hear all the chatter. There's not going to be any chatter in Gainesville about the Gainesville Jags. People are going to know it's your stadium to play in until the other one's ready. So no, I get it though. It's going to be uncomfortable that for 2 years, while this team's really good, they may be hosting playoff games in Gainesville. I get that, and I understand that. But I'll go back to what I said at the top. Sometimes you have to have a little pain to get there, and there's a little bit of pain. But the end, the way you talked about it, and Alessandra, the way you talked about the feel of it, the outdoor feel, the walking trail feel to it, that's going to be cool for everybody. So you know what? You grin and bear it for a couple of years, and then you get there. I do want it earlier than later, and I hope that's where we land. I really do.
I can agree with you on one thing for sure. I'm not on board for Orlando. I don't think that's the location. It's got to be Gainesville or Daytona if you're asking me. I've said it before. I said it just a minute ago. I'm not on board. I don't like the 4-year plan or the 2-year plan idea, but I'm also not crazy about the 4-year plan. The bank is what it is at this point, and starting a construction project there and then asking fans to live through that for 4 years, not exactly convenient. I do think that taking the Jaguars out of Jacksonville at this point in their maturation process, especially how competitive they're expected to be, is a tough pill to swallow for a fan base that has suffered. And I think it's fair to use that word. This fan base has suffered, and now you see Trevor Lawrence, you see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they say, we're going to go play games 2 years somewhere else while we build a new home. I get it, but the problem is, and we have to, and I think, Frank, you're going to back me up on this one, the stadiums here in town aren't capable of housing it. We can talk about UNF till we're blue in the face. We can talk about one-to-one financial ballpark till we're blue in the face, and they are great facilities. But it would take $100 million, $150 million, and another renovation project just to get those ready to host a game. So I know fans at home keep asking, why can't they play somewhere else? But we're talking about one renovation project turning into 2 renovation projects, and now we're not talking about just one timeline of stressing about construction around the bank being ready. Now you're talking about, oh, by the way, they're back up home. We got another timeline, another construction process that Mark Lamping and everyone would be like chomping at the bit. Is it going to be done in time? And that everybody who's been through a construction process knows that ain't exactly ideal.
And Jamal, even when all that's done, even when everything, and I agree with you, the pain of that in addition to the pain of the stadium, but even when all that's done, it's not going to be as good as a football stadium. It's just not. The game you talked about in Bristol was a really cool thing. You were there. I just watched it on TV. It was cool, but it's a one-time thing. Right. You play football games in a football stadium that's already ready. So and Hodges Stadium's a wonderful venue, and Lord knows we've all seen a bunch of baseball down at the Breaking Field of the baseball grounds. but they're not football stadiums. This needs to be done in a football stadium. And again, I don't know where it's going to land. I don't think the Jags know. I don't think anybody knows this. Remember, they haven't even agreed to a deal yet with the city. But I'll say it again. I would be surprised if it doesn't land in Gainesville or Orlando for 2 years. And I'd be moderately surprised if it's not Gainesville.
All right, we've got a long road ahead when it talks about, or as it comes to talking about stadium projects. Mark Lamping, Jaguars team president, about to start making his rounds starting tomorrow as they start these huddle-ups around the city as he tries to kind of gain steam and talk to the public about the project. We'll be keeping coverage of those right here on Channel 4. Here's a look at all the locations and the dates. He's going to make his rounds all over the city of Jacksonville, get a chance to talk to folks. If you're interested in the stadium, make sure you check your calendar and mark one down and try and make it over there. The first one starts tomorrow, so we will have coverage of that here on Channel 4. But before that, we've got plenty of more of the Sunday Sports Zone coming your way. Coming up after the break, we're going to keep Frank Frangie and Alessandra Pomprian here as we go through the Jaguars off-season program and start to turn that page to minicamp. Stay tuned. More Sports Zones coming up after this.